go ahead and get us started. Welcome to Florida State University's webinar series called Art Education in Critical Times, or ACT for short. I'll be introducing our webinar presenters in just a moment. In the meantime, my name is Amber Ward, and I'm the Director of Online Programming in the Department of Art Education here at Florida State. And this professional development outreach is sponsored by our online MS in Art Education program. Today's presenters are Victoria Mendenhall and Sarah Myrick. We're thrilled that they're joining us here tonight. Victoria is a 2016 graduate from FSU's Masters in Art Education program. This year marks her fourth year teaching art at Gilchrist Elementary in Tallahassee, Florida, where she was awarded Teacher of the Year for 2020. She takes a process-based, student-centered approach to teaching and wants her students to always love the journey of making a masterpiece. When she's not teaching, she's working on starting her ceramics business and spending time with her husband and puppy, Bumper. It's a tongue twister. Sarah Myrick is a recent graduate from FSU's master's program in art education. In fact, just not even a week ago. She lives in Tallahassee, Florida, and is hoping to teach at an elementary school beginning in fall 2021. She takes a student-centered, community-based, wonder-filled, and relational approach to art education. When she is not teaching, she is tending to her flower garden, inviting people into her home, spending time outdoors, and playing board games with her family. Tonight's presentation will last about an hour. Feel free to grab materials at any time so that you can work alongside Victoria and Sarah. All attendees have been muted during the presentation to reduce ambient noise in the Zoom recording. However, there will be an opportunity for Q&A at the end of the presentation. You may submit questions at any time using the chat function located at the bottom of your Zoom screen. And then I'll monitor those questions as they come in and put them in a Word doc. And then we'll share those with the presenters once they wrap up their presentation. And then in the coming days, we will email to you a certificate of completion for professional development credit. And now I'd like to welcome our presenters, Victoria and Sarah, who will be introducing an instructional unit titled Passion Mapping, Portrait of a Sixth Grader.
All right. Well, welcome everyone. We are so excited to be here. So this is our unit that Sarah and I have created that is Passion Mapping, a Portrait of a Sixth Grader. So again, my name is Victoria. Like Amber said, it's my fourth year at Gilchrist Elementary here in Tallahassee. I love being an elementary art teacher. It's been amazing and an amazing journey. And this was actually the first year I got to host an intern. So this is where I introduced Sarah.
Hi everyone, my name is Sarah Myrick, and yes, on Sunday I just graduated with my master's in art education at Florida State University, and me and Victoria met about 4 months ago in the halls of Gilchrist. She was my cooperating teacher, and I saw in the messages a lot of teachers are here, so I'm sure you can recall your student teaching experience. And my teaching experience has been so wonderful with Victoria, and I've learned so much from her, and we got along so well that we decided to create a unit together and present together. One of the biggest things I learned from Victoria, though, is how to embrace the unknown with confidence. She taught me this in so many ways, and we were laughing about it last night, so much so that we had to bring up this Michael Scott quote that says, "Sometimes I'll start a sentence and I don't even know where it's going. I just hope I find it along the way." And this relates to what we're talking about, because this unit, we sort of found our way along it throughout it. We, like Victoria said, we're process oriented. So we didn't exactly know how it was going to turn out. And so we had to just embrace the unknown with confidence and trust our students with our lessons. And we'll get into it more, but
and we're excited. So the overview of this unit is that it consists of 4 lessons for students to challenge themselves and reflect about who they are and who they want to be through passion mapping, which is the process of layering. So students are going through this transition of being in their last year of elementary school and now transitioning into moving into middle school, going into a whole different environment. So this lesson is to kind of get their feelings on that and sense of identity with that.
Yeah, and just in case it wasn't clear, we did this with 5th graders, not 6th graders. They're 5th graders going into 6th grade. So the heart of our lesson, we wanted to ask students how their talents, desires, and skills combine in them to make them unique individuals, how layering with materials can contribute to new self-knowledge, and how they can navigate their passions every day.
And so what we really wanted students to get out of this, or our objectives, are for students to reflect, experiment, and project. So we want students to think about and reflect on what their interests are, what are their passions right now in this moment in their life, and we create a passion map with that. We also want students to experiment with different materials and different medias, and have students figure out how that in itself helps express their thoughts and feelings and emotions. And also experiment in the additive and subjective compositional method. So the adding on and taking away of collage and using materials to create a work that shows their self-identity. And finally, we want them to project who they want to be in 6th grade through topography and layering of art. So with that, they end up with a beautiful self-portrait.
We looked at the contemporary artist, Krista David. She does a lot in collage, painting, assemblage, and she takes found materials and assembles them in a way to create meaning, to tell a story, or to form her own identity. And they're often around themes of home, belonging, and faith. But what we wanted students to take out of this the most was that she makes a lot of choices. And if you listen to her talk on YouTube, she talks about choice a lot. And throughout this unit, students are making a lot of choices, and that's what makes their piece unique. And I think it also shares that how our choices as people is what makes us unique as well.
And so these are the lesson overview. So like I said earlier, it is 4 different lessons. We start with lesson 1 in passion mapping. So students are guided through a process in which they create a web map that shows their different interests, who, what, why they care about different things. Lesson 2 is when we collage and gesso. So we introduced contemporary artists, we use magazines and newspapers, and students find things that interest them, compose it all together in a way that's interesting to them, and then we put on a layer of watered down gesso. Lesson 3 is when we work with those different materials. Honestly, it's anything they can find in the art room. So paint pens, watercolors, acrylics, anything they can find. We let them just experiment and have fun with it, and see where it takes them. And the final lesson is self-portraits. So students create a how I see myself self-portrait. So this is again where they use paint pens and they draw on transparencies so they can still see, you see their portrait as well as what is lying underneath.
So the start of our unit on day 1 is we kind of talk about the transition the kids are about to make. We did this in spring. And then we show this video by Fitz Callhall, which is a National Geographic, he's a National Geographic storyteller. And he talks about how he's taken his everyday mundane passions and combine them to a job where he can do it every single day. And the main takeaway we want students to take from this, and you tonight, is we want you to be inspired by life and just have a kind of leave it feeling like a little zest of life. That's what me and Victoria, every time we watched it with the kids, we were like pumped. So we'll show it to you guys to set the tone for the rest of the lesson or unit.
There wasn't really a job description for what I wanted to do. You know, people don't hire storytellers, much less adventure storytellers. That was my dream. I mean, I was that 6-year-old kid you'd see with his face buried in National Geographics. I knew there was magic in life on the road. I loved climbing. I loved being outside. I would load all this stuff up into my car, leave the city, and I'd spend a couple months out on the road, and then I'd come back home and I'd write it all down. But I wound up with all these stories I'd gathered from my time on the road, and I couldn't sell them anywhere. I was about to give up when I had this realization that nobody was gonna give me this job. I had to go create it. Once I realized that, it was like the horizon opened up. I started a radio show in my closet. I went on to make films. We found our community. It's 7 years later, and I'm still basically doing the same thing. I'm loading up gear, putting it in the car, and hitting the road to go spend time with the people that inspire me in places that inspire me. That process has come full circle, right back to where my dream started. When National Geographic asked me to help with Adventures of the Year, the 6-year-old boy in me kind of chuckled. We pulled together 10 incredible stories, 10 incredible feats from people who live life on their own terms. I think it can be easy to put these people up on a pedestal, to think of them as heroes or almost superhuman. And while talent plays a role in these people's feats and their successes, it's not what makes their ideas a reality. It's grit, creativity, passion, kindness, and love. That's the human spirit. I know in my heart I could be an adventurer of the year, but that's not what I want to do. I want to tell stories, spend as much time as I can outside, and pass that love for it along to my son. My struggles to make my dreams a reality have taken just as much commitment as paddling into a big wave or climbing a peak in the Karakoram. There's a lot of ways to take risks in life. That's the magic of it. I know this. You have to do the thing that makes you tick. You have to do it on a daily basis. You have to do it unapologetically. Do it with love.
I just had a memory watching that of talking to the kids about how when I was their age, I thought I had to wait to be an adult to contribute to the world or do something that I loved every day. And I wish I had someone to tell me then that I had all the tools that I needed and the ability to like pursue my passions in 5th grade. And so we kind of opened up with that video and gave them the permission to dream and think about who they want to be and what can I do now to work on who I want to be and what my passions are. So part of that was we have to figure out what our passions are. And I remember we talked about what passions are, and then we asked students on a piece of 9x12, 8x11.
It was 9x12.
9x12 piece of paper to start by writing 3 to 5 broad passions or interests, and write them big and with space in between them. So it could be sports, movies. This girl wrote witchcraft, story making, nature. And we'll show you another example in a minute. But they'll have 5 minutes to write those big, broad passions. And then coming out of those, branching out of those, we asked them to do specific passions coming out, whether that's who, what, when, where, and why. If they put friends, we told them to write specifically, what friends are you talking about? If you put video games, what are your favorite video games? And so we asked them to really get specific about what they love. And then they have 10 minutes to do that. And then we move on to the last 5 minutes where they take colored pencils and connect the ideas to one another. And we show an example of how to do that. And I was really nervous about how they're going to connect it, but they are much more intuitive than I thought. And they made a lot of connections. On the next slide, I'll show you really fun connections. So she wrote fixing things, collecting things, reading and cooking, and art. And if you see under collecting things, she put collecting paper dolls, and then that connects to how out of art it branches from drawing to paper dolls. And then she also connects her paper dolls to informational text about paper dolls. And so she just made a lot of interesting connections. And we end the lesson by asking students to write down one sentence which combines all their understandings. This is kind of a long question, but I said to take a moment to ask yourself if there's any passions you did not recognize before, or daily activities you do that you really enjoy but never considered them a passion. Was there a lot of connecting lines going to a certain passion? Or is there a passion that ties everything together? In short, what's a new understanding that they have? And so, again, I was so surprised by some really thoughtful sentences at the end. At the top, something I learned about myself today was I like math more than I think I did, and that there are different ways to use math in different activities. On the bottom, she said, I learned I enjoyed hiking, and I do love my family even if I don't act like it. Today I learned that I'm creative and like art more than I thought, or I realized that I love the freedom of being outside. And I love that one because it's not just I love being outside, it's that person realized it's the freedom of being outside that they love.
So with that first lesson being timed and being more guided, for the rest of the lessons, these are much more experimental and let students kind of go with what they're feeling or what they're seeing or what they're thinking. So our second lesson is the collage step. So this is where we introduce the amazing Krista David, and we give students a whole pack of magazines, and that they can go through, newspapers. They can ask us to print images, or find images, words, colors, anything that they find interesting or spark their curiosity. Now, this is something where you are going to get students that are saying, well, I can't find anything that I like. That's when they can choose colors. I would tell kids, what is your favorite color? See if you can find 5 different things with that specific color and they can collage them on. So it doesn't just have to be an actual image of something. It can be a color or a texture that just is inspiring or interesting. And then this step does not necessarily have to connect with their passion map. So if a student writes that they are passionate about soccer, they don't necessarily have to have a soccer ball on there or an athlete. They could maybe even collage their own together and make something out of something different. So the collage can start to go in a different direction, and that's okay. And students are introduced to composition and layering of images. Again, that goes with Krista David. So how she uses composition for her work to create a story and to create a meaning. We go over that with students to help them kind of guide them in their own story making about themselves. And once students have finished their collage, this is where we put a watered down layer of gesso. And it's really important that it's watered down because when you brush it on, we want it to dry transparent. So this allows the collage to still show through, but now we can work on top of it and we continue our
So in lesson 3, after the gesso is dried, as you can see, students are asked to bring to the surface the images and textures, colors that that are the most meaningful to them. And we teach them this by showing Dr. Sarah Scott Shields time-lapse videos at the beginning of every lesson or class of this lesson. So it may have taken us 2 or 3 class periods to get done with layering materials. And so we just showed a different video, and we'll show you guys one in the next slide. And as it's playing, we talk about what is going on possibly in Dr. Shields' head as she's making art. And again, kids are a lot more intuitive than I thought that they would be. I would look at their passion maps at the end of the day, or their layering materials, and they would take one thing from the video and do it themselves. And it was just incredible what they pick up on. Now, the prompt that we asked them to think about as they were working, that they don't have to respond to directly, but to keep in their head as they're making art, is who are they right now? How has the last 5 years contributed to who they are as an individual, and who do they want to be in middle school? How do they want to be perceived? And what type of person do they want to be? And again, we weren't asking them to be really direct about it, but to just go with what they were feeling, or even just doodling. So we'll show you a video right now and kind of show you what Sarah does.
So I don't know if it got stuck on anyone else, but I'm gonna go ahead and pause it. Okay. So something that was really awesome about showing these videos to the kids was at the end of them, students would be so shocked at where did you come up with that idea? And like I said in the beginning, I'm a very process-based art educator. So I love to encourage them to start somewhere, and you might not know where you end up, but it's that whole point of the journey and where and how you get there and how you get to the ending that really matters. And Dr. Shields does a great job of showing that in her visual journals, and it was a great visual representation for students to kind of see the process from start to finish of how she layers and how she gets from the beginning to the very end. Oh no, it starts now. All right. So here you can kind of see some different examples. This student decided to rip up some pieces of paper to enhance or bring forward the image of a beach, which she had said was her absolute favorite place to go. And over here on the right, you can see this artist, she added different words like around the garden and really started to bring out the flowers that she had in some of her collage. And she also focused on a lot of images of plants, foods, things like that, and really brought those out. And so this is the point where you really get to see their personalities coming through, which is so much fun. Here's some more examples up close, and you can see them really experimenting. This student went just full on with her hands, dipping it, and started painting with her hands. And it's also really fun too, if you can see on this bottom center image, you can start to see part of the passion map coming through. So even though they've layered on top of that, this is now the third, fourth layer, there's still parts from that beginning popping through and things that are still super important to students showing through on top of the layers that they're adding. So the final lesson is self-portraits. So again, we open up with a discussion on who they are, and what makes each of us unique. So our different talents, our different desires, our different skills. And at tables, I provide students with guides on how to draw their faces, how to draw their portraits, with options of different emotions, facial features, hair types, and accessories. So they get to choose how they are drawing themselves and how they want to present themselves in this self-portrait. And I'll show you all the guides that I use in the next slide. And we open up with the question again, who are you right now? Who do you want to be? How can you show that in your self-portrait? So they get to do that with all of their choices. All right, and here are the guides that I use. I love them. I found them on Teacher Pay Teachers by Art with Mrs. E. She is a great resource, and she has a lot of different guides that are like this, where it just is kind of a reminder for students, as these are fifth graders. We've been through the process multiple times of how to draw a self-portrait in their total time with me in elementary school. So this is kind of just a reminder, and they get to choose whether they want to draw it in more of this style, where it is more of kind of a cartoon style, or they can resort back to what we've learned about actual proportions of how the eyes relate to the rest of the face, things like that. So again, it's all about choice. And here are some of the self-portraits. So students start them on a piece of white paper. You can use either 4x6 or 5x7. I believe we used a 5x7. And they get to draw their portraits. They can draw a background if they would like. And again, we left it up to them whether they wanted to do just from chest up, or if they wanted to do a whole body. So it also ended up showing a range of different portraits, which was really beautiful and interesting to see as they all progressed. And once they finished them on paper, we gave them a clear transparency. Now, I had these left over from the previous art teacher that was at my school, but I've also found that you can use the extra laminate from a laminator, and they work just as well. But we wanted them to do them on transparencies with oil paint pens so that you could still see the collage underneath, because that collage is really important. It shows everything about them, what's interesting about them, what they like, what they don't like. It just has a lot of feeling in that, and we didn't want a portrait to completely hide pieces of them. And I love this one, especially where he traced thing and added, when I say nothing, I mean it. So they're just super fun, and their personalities really show through. And now we have a few examples. These are the final images because we have made it through our unit. And we just want to show you some examples and tell you some stories about a few students that really excelled at this and just made this whole teaching process super worthwhile. So this is a student, Robert, and he is normally not artistically driven. He likes to be outside. He likes physical activities, and he just normally in the art room isn't really interested. But this lesson, I have never seen him shine as much as he did. His whole personality came through. He's normally a very reserved student, very quiet, doesn't say much. But in this lesson, he really just went with it. And from the image, you can see that this is not a reserved student. Like, he really just shined through this whole process. And you can even see in the picture on the right, he is smiling through that mask. So he just blew me away. And I really learned a lot about him through this process. You can kind of see the collage underneath. There's different foods, there's dogs. I learned that he had a dog that he loved so much. And he just really had fun with this, and it was awesome to see.
This is one of my favorite portraits and stories. This girl came in and you can tell that she likes art, but kind of has a protective demeanor. And I remember on the first day with passion mapping, she did her passion map, but her sentence on the back of the paper was, "I learned nothing in art today." So that was the tone of her. She has like a little spunky personality. And then she started working on her collage. And as you can see in the three pictures in the middle of the collage behind her drawing of her portrait, once she started working on top of it, she was hiding those images. And I believe, now that I remember and I'm looking at it, the middle is of a really close-up elephant. But I came up to her and I said, your portrait is really starting to remind me of you. And she's like, what does that mean? And I said, well, you're very interesting, but mysterious. You kind of hide behind this demeanor, and but you're interesting. So you're trying to read more. And so I start talking about her art, and I start just talking about what my mind is doing while I'm looking at it. And I'm saying, I'm drawn into this picture of an elephant. Is that an elephant? Why is it so close? And then I start to see in the corner some of these circular patterns, and they show up throughout the entire piece. And I start to tell her what she's already naturally doing, but also kind of explain to her that she is a unique individual. And I think she really received it well. I remember her kind of like, I just remember her receiving my comment. And so I think it's really important, if anybody does do this, and actually as art educators, to really speak life into your students and tell them what they're doing, because that's the best. That's how I became an artist, was somebody telling me what I was doing. And we all have this superpower. I think we sometimes forget of being able to read and express what different materials do and mean. Anyway, this turned out to be just an amazing portrait, and she focused on abstract, and I think that is part of her personality, to create this illusion or this mysterious demeanor. And even her portrait kind of expresses this this little subtle, quiet, mysterious personality. And I told her at the end, I said, in middle school, you better take art. She's like, I will. So, and then this is one of my other favorites. This kid, me and Victoria were just talking about how I said, is he always a class clown? And she was like, yes. He definitely like goofs off a lot, loves the attention, and kind of didn't take it very seriously. But in the passion maps, you ask them to really think about things they care about. So I can tell he had like a little bite. He was kind of biting the hook a little bit. And then when we got to collage and we said, you can pick anything that interests you, he picked the funniest, most random pictures. And I was like, yeah, do it. You can be funny in art. Like, I think he kept having to receive permission, and that gave him like the care, I guess, because every time I came over and maybe he was doing something to be funny, I'm like, yeah, do it. And then he got to the portrait and he just did not like his portrait. And I forgot exactly how he got to doing these portraits. Maybe he just started doing it. And I said, well, I love that. Why don't you do that? And as soon as I gave him that permission, he repeated that pattern in such an amazing way. And we talked about how we both love V for Vendetta and how it reminds us of that movie, and it reminds us of graffiti. And then I remember he took green paint and put it on his hands and just turned it into this amazing, almost like street art that has humor and is funny. And I felt like that was a huge transformation for him. And I love this piece so much.
And this one pulls your heartstrings a little bit. So this student actually lost her sister last year. And this, when we started this project, this was her first time back in my classroom since that happened last year due to COVID and everything. She was digital. So seeing her, I as a teacher have never had a student that has gone through a tragedy like that, losing someone that important to them. So I was kind of nervous having her do this project, just because we were talking about, their life and what they have gone through and what they want to do as they go on. And so this, I was just really impressed and really surprised, and to make me tear up, but she's really great. And her family is a very faithful family. So I love that she used words like paradise and around the garden. And she has all of these different words in her passion map about her family. And you can kind of see, like, up at the top, it says, I'm pretty sure it started with nature, but now it kind of looks like nurture. And that is her personality. She is kind of the nurturer. And I just think this shows how her family is kind of processing it and going through that kind of transition. And you can kind of see that she knows that she will be happy going forward. And so this portrait just is so awesome. And even that dog standing so proudly, like, it really shows her personality and how she's going to be okay through all of this. And she just did an amazing job. So this one pulled my heartstrings a lot. And then this one, another reserve student, you would never tell by this portrait. Very vibrant, very just out there. And so it's been really cool for this whole process to see what they're portraying in real life, and when we see them in class, and then when they make this art, it's completely who they are on the inside. And being able to kind of release that through this whole unit has been such a pleasure. And just witnessing all of it, it's definitely been one of my favorite units that I've ever done. And so it has been so awesome to get to share that experience with Sarah. And here's some final two. Again, these just really showed their personalities. This student, super quirky, adorable, loves dogs. This girl, you can tell she's very colorful and vibrant, and that quote unquote cool girl vibe. So it's just very awesome. So now we're at assessments. And I'm going to be honest, before we even start, Sarah and I didn't get to actually really do a large assessment of this project because we ran out of time. So for formative assessments, we did do check-ins after each lesson. We, like Sarah said earlier, we wrote on the backs, and we would write sentences about new information that they learned about themselves, and at their table, they would share different ideas of what they changed about their artwork, what they added, what they took away, what they added to their self-portrait, things like that. And that also allowed them to share more about themselves with their classmates, because maybe they haven't talked about the things that we talked about in our classroom. So for summative, by the end of the project, we were hoping for students to be able to form a full artist statement using those writings from each lesson, along with their emotions that they've put into their work. We really would have liked to do a class gallery walk with a Post-it note critique, and we ended up doing a school-wide art show. So all of these ended up in our digital art show at Gilchrist. So that's kind of why we ran out of time. It went a little bit longer than we anticipated. But we would have loved to do that Post-it note critique to give students some feedback and again kind of boost their confidence of their artwork, because all of them were absolutely amazing.
So before we go to questions, just one more thought on this project to sum it up. Also, me and Victoria really, where I grew as a teacher was we really let the process inform our next steps. And we kind of were alongside the students. We didn't like pre-plan this thing and then execute it. Obviously we had ideas and guidance, but I remember the day that I found paint pens in the room and I put it on the transparency and I was like, Victoria, paint pens, like we gotta use the paint pens. And then Victoria would bring out tin foil and she's like, how about tin foil? And it was just a very fun, process oriented, and we really listened to what the kids were responding to the most and giving them time where they needed it and space where they needed it. So I didn't know, I've never experienced that as a teacher, and it's kind of scary to embrace the unknown, but I think that's why these were so successful, because we gave ourselves permission to not know. I think kids gave themselves a lot of permission. So as we end, I just want to ask, we both want to ask if anyone has any other ways that you would assess this project, or is there another layering process that you've tried before and could be beneficial for us in the future? Yeah, we just kind of want to leave it open to any questions in general.
That was fantastic, Victoria and Sarah. Thank you so much. All the comments in the chat were just amazing. So I hope, in fact, like maybe I'll save chat. So that way, in case you couldn't monitor the chat to see all the affirmative comments coming in, I'll message that to you. They were really great. So in addition to the questions that Victoria and Sarah are asking you, there were a few questions that came in which were addressed along the way. So one is, what is the water to gesso ratio? And I think Sarah Shields responded to that, but if you all wanted to talk about your process as well, just the kind of trial and error.
So I don't know if we actually had a full-on ratio, but you want it, how do I describe it? You want it watered down enough to where we usually would test it. It's hard to,
you don't want it to be like water drippy.
Yeah, but you don't thick either.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of like to find a sweet spot. I would say grab like a piece of scrap paper and kind of test it out before you put it on an artwork.
Sarah said, once you know, you know.
That's exactly what it is. Once you know, you know.
It's all part of the journey, right?
Yes.
The water to gesso ratio. Someone asked if Sarah Scott Shields videos were available online, and it sounds like she has a YouTube channel available. A more recent question came in: for how long did the students work on the instructional unit?
So the passion mapping was one day, and then the collage, so we have 45-minute class periods. The collage portion took about 2 classes. And then the layering of materials took about 2 to 3 classes, depending on the specific class. And then the portrait itself also took about 2 classes. So overall, this was, for us, it was almost a whole quarter of seeing these students once a week for 45 minutes. And this lesson or this unit took up that entire 9 weeks.
Oh, and something
I could
really
see why.
cool that happened that we forgot to talk about. At the end of the lesson, we asked one of the fifth grade classes what lesson was their favorite, and there was no consensus. Everyone said a different thing. I remember drawing about it. Some kids said passion mapping, some said collage. So I do think it's varied enough that it can span a quarter, because different kids related to different parts more or less.
Another question came in. Did you two ask kids what they learned about themselves after each layer?
So we would always ask, like, what did you find out that you liked, or what did you find out that you're drawn to? We would always ask questions. And even if it wasn't at the end of every class, Sarah and I were always walking around and talking more one-on-one with students. We found that super helpful and insightful, was to just sit down and have a conversation with them and really kind of see how they're figuring themselves out, and yeah, how they're feeling about that transition going into sixth grade. So yes, we definitely loved to chat with them and see what they were finding out about themselves.
Any other questions? If you want to, oh, it looks like Sarah just shared her YouTube channel. Shameless plug. Here's a question for students who have zero passion for life, no favorite color, food, clothes, games, game, etc., and art. How do you inspire students like this?
So I actually did have a student like that. And I will be honest, it's tough to kind of inspire someone who kind of shuts down. It is almost kind of like a wall. So that is where I really like to just sit down with them one-on-one. And I know it is hard as a teacher. It is helpful when you have someone in the classroom with you, so you can take that time to do that. But if you're able, really sitting down and just having a conversation and asking the questions of, okay, well, what do you do after school, or what do you enjoy at school? Like, what's something that would make your day? Things like that, and just kind of pulling that out, and asking them, like, what word would describe you, and maybe creating that word with that collage, or writing that word, and just kind of sparking from there. I think making those connections with the student one-on-one can really help put down that wall and bring out what they're kind of hiding underneath. Yeah, so just asking those questions and really digging deep.
I would also encourage you to give them permission to talk about like pop culture and video games and the TV shows like that they watch.
Music they
They're like guilty pleasures in a way, and like allow that to come into school walls. I think they're always surprised when you're like, I can write video games, and you're like, yeah, write them all down and write all the characters you like. And sometimes pop culture is like the way that they start to get excited about something. I think there's a lot of video gamers right now who are very passionate about video gaming.
Yes.
Among us.
You, if you're an elementary or middle school teacher, I'm sure you see the Among Us.
Oh, he doesn't watch TV or video games.
None at all.
Tough.
That is tough.
That's so hard. He doesn't have a favorite food, like whipped cream or something.
I can't see the chat.
Oh, just it sounds like there's a student who could potentially have trouble connecting with the assignment due to due to barriers regarding interests, maybe. I think you two responded really well, and continuing to ask questions of that student. I just want to say we're at a minute two, and I want to honor everyone's time. If you would help me thank Victoria and Sarah with a little love or clapping emoji or whatever, it was really, really, really fantastic. I learned a ton from you and appreciate your sharing your time with us. And if you all are interested in the PD certificate, if you just want to chat to me your email address, I'll be sure to get that to you. I think I've saved the chat. So you can just click on what there's like a little tab that says everyone. If you just go to Amber Ward and then chat me your email, I'll be sure to get the PD certificate to you.
Thank you, everyone,
Thank you
for
so much.
listening to us. Wow.
So much fun.
That's really good.
Yeah.
It was really good. I'm going to stop recording.